July 14, 1972. The Sands Hotel, Las Vegas. Charles Bronson was floating alone in the hotel pool at 6:30 a.m., doing his daily laps, when his heart suddenly seized. A cardiac arrhythmia, his heart skipping beats, then racing uncontrollably. He would had warning signs for weeks, but ignored them, too busy filming the mechanic to see a doctor. Charles tried to swim to the edge. His arms stopped working. His vision darkened. He sank beneath the surface. There was only one other person near the pool at that hour. A 34-year-old schoolteacher from Cleveland, named Thomas Gardner, who had saved up for 2 years to afford this Las Vegas vacation, was sitting in a pool chair eating breakfast and reading the newspaper. Thomas did not recognize Charles Bronson. He just saw a man drowning. He jumped into the pool fully clothed, dragged Charles to the surface, hauled him to the edge, and performed CPR until the hotel medics arrived. For 4 minutes and 30 seconds, Thomas Gardner breathed life back into a man he would never met. Charles survived. The cardiac arrhythmia was treated. He was back filming within a week. Thomas Gardner went home to Cleveland and told almost nobody. He did not sell his story to the tabloids. He did not try to leverage his connection to a movie star. He just returned to teaching 3rd grade and considered the episode closed. For the next 22 years, every year on July 14th, Thomas Gardner received a phone call. Same voice, same words. "This is Charles Bronson. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did." And every year he paid the school fees for Thomas's children, anonymously, until they were through college. This is the untold story of the debt Charles Bronson never forgot, and the man who saved his life and asked for nothing. Thomas Gardner had never been to Las Vegas before the summer of 1972. He was a 3rd grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary School in Cleveland, Ohio. He made $12,000 a year, drove a 10-year-old Ford, and took his vacations seriously because they were rare and hard-won. He would been saving for the Vegas trip for 2 years, putting aside $50 a month from each paycheck. His wife Sandra had originally wanted to come with him, but their son David had been sick, and she would stay home to take care of him. So Thomas went alone, feeling guilty about it, but also quietly thrilled for 5 days of solitude. The Sands Hotel was more expensive than Thomas had planned, but he would stretch the budget because he wanted to see Dean Martin perform. He would been a Dean Martin fan since college, and seeing him live at the Sands felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. His first morning at the hotel, Thomas woke before dawn from force of habit. 3rd grade teachers develop an involuntary early rising reflex that survives weekends and vacations. By 6 a.m. he was dressed and restless. He found his way to the hotel pool, caught a cup of coffee from a sleepy attendant, and settled into a chair with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He was reading about the upcoming Muhammad Ali fight when he noticed movement in the pool, a lone swimmer doing laps, strong, efficient strokes, clearly someone who did this regularly. Thomas paid no particular attention. He returned to his newspaper. About 15 minutes later, something changed. The rhythmic splash of swimming became regular, then stopped. Thomas lowered his newspaper. The man in the pool was struggling. His arms were flailing ineffectively. His head went under, came up, went under again. Thomas dropped his newspaper and ran to the pool edge. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. The man sank. Thomas jumped in without thinking. He did not consider whether he was a strong enough swimmer, did not think about his clothes or his wallet or his watch. He just went in. He found Charles Bronson beneath the surface, unconscious, sinking slowly. Thomas grabbed him under the arms and hauled upward. Getting an unconscious adult man to the surface and then to the pool edge tested every ounce of Thomas's strength. He was not an especially athletic man, a bit soft around the middle from Sandra's cooking and a sedentary teaching lifestyle, but adrenaline is a remarkable chemical. Thomas got Charles to the edge and draped him over it, then hauled himself out and began CPR. He would learned it at a Red Cross course the previous spring. The school district had required all teachers to be certified after a student had choked in the cafeteria. 4 minutes and 30 seconds of chest compressions and rescue breathing. Later, the hotel medics would tell Thomas that those 4 minutes and 30 seconds were the difference between life and death. Charles coughed water, gasped, opened his eyes. He looked up at Thomas, a heavy-set man in soaking wet clothes, breathing hard, face white with fear, and managed a single word. "What? You were drowning," Thomas said. "I pulled you out." The hotel medics arrived 3 minutes later. They assessed Charles, stabilized him, and called for an ambulance. The cardiac arrhythmia was diagnosed at the hospital, treated with medication, and monitored for 2 days. Thomas gave a statement to the hotel's security and the paramedics. Then he went back to his room, took off his wet clothes, and sat on the bed shaking for 20 minutes. He would saved a man's life. The enormity of that hit him gradually, like a wave building offshore before crashing. Later that day, Charles, released from the hospital with medication and strict instructions to see his own cardiologist immediately, sent a message to Thomas's room asking if he could visit. Thomas opened the door to find Charles Bronson, and this time, Thomas recognized him. "Oh," Thomas said, you are Charles Bronson." "I am, and you are the man who saved my life this morning." Charles extended his hand. "I do not know how to thank you. I had just did what anyone would do," Thomas said. "You would be surprised how many people would not." It parked for about an hour. Charles asked about Thomas, his teaching, his family, his life in Cleveland. Thomas, still slightly stunned by the situation, answered honestly and simply. He taught 3rd grade. He had a wife named Sandra and 2 kids, David and Rebecca. He liked baseball and gardening and Dean Martin. Charles smiled at the last one. "You are here to see Dean perform?" "I have been saving 2 years for this trip. Are you going tonight?" "I have a ticket for tomorrow night." "You are going tonight," Charles said. "Front table, my guest, and every night you are here." Thomas tried to protest. Charles would not hear it. That evening, Thomas Gardner sat at a front table at the Sands Copa Room and watched Dean Martin perform from 15 feet away. Dean, apparently briefed by Charles, dedicated a song to "my friend Tom from Cleveland, who apparently does good work." Thomas cried, not from embarrassment, from joy. It was the kind of moment that becomes a story you tell for the rest of your life. Before Thomas left Las Vegas to return home, Charles came to see him off. He pressed something into Thomas's hand, an envelope. "For the inconvenience," Charles said. Thomas opened it. $5,000 in cash, more money than he made in 5 months of teaching. "I cannot take this," Thomas said immediately. "You saved my life. $5,000 is an insult compared to what that is worth, but it I have on me. There will be more." "Charles, I do not want money. I am just glad you are okay. Take it, please, for your family." Thomas took it, though he felt deeply uncomfortable. When he got home to Cleveland, he used part of it to pay off the family car loan and put the rest in his children's college fund. 3 months later, Thomas received a check in the mail from a law firm in Los Angeles, $10,000. The accompanying letter said simply, "From a friend who is grateful." Thomas called the law firm to ask who would send it. The lawyer said only that the donor wished to remain anonymous, but Thomas suspected. A year later, on 14th of 1973, the first anniversary of the pool incident, Thomas's phone rang. Thomas Gardner? Yes, this is Charles Bronson. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did. Thomas was silent for a moment. You do not have to call. I know. I wanted to. How are you? Your heart? Being managed? Medication? Lifestyle changes? Apparently, I am not as indestructible as I thought. I am glad you are okay. Because of you. Have a good day, Thomas. And the call ended. 2 minutes. No longer. A year later, same date, same time, same call. This is Charles Bronson. I just wanted to say thank you. For 22 years, Charles called on July 4th. The calls were always brief, 2 to 3 minutes at most. Charles would ask about Thomas's family. Thomas would ask about Charles's health and career, and then Charles would say goodbye. Thomas mentioned the calls to Sandra, but asked her not to tell anyone else. It was a private thing, something that felt sacred in its simplicity. A famous man calling a regular man once a year to say thank you. Alongside the annual calls, money kept coming, not every month, not on a schedule, just periodically, channeled through the law firm. Always anonymous, always significant, 5,000 here, 8,000 there. When Thomas's daughter Rebecca needed surgery that the family's insurance did not fully cover, $10,000 appeared from the anonymous donor within a week. When Thomas's son David went to Ohio State University, his tuition bills were mysteriously reduced each semester by a scholarship from a foundation Thomas could not trace. When he graduated and applied to law school, a fellowship appeared that covered most of his costs. When Rebecca wanted to go to nursing school, same thing. Unexplained financial assistance appeared at critical moments. Thomas never asked Charles directly about the money. The calls were for thanks, not business, and Thomas sensed Charles would be uncomfortable if the financial assistance was acknowledged explicitly, but Thomas knew the timing was too perfect, the amounts too well calibrated to his family's actual needs. Over the years, Charles had quietly funded Thomas's entire family's education. David graduated law school, became a public defender in Cleveland. Rebecca became a registered nurse. Both of them built good careers with foundations that had been quietly supported by the man their father had pulled from a pool in 1972. In 1904, the July 14th call was the last one. Charles was struggling with early health issues. Ed would be increasingly incapacitated by Alzheimer's in the years that followed. The call came as always, brief, warm, grateful. Thomas, this is Charles Bronson. I wanted to say thank you. Charles, you call every year. You have already. I will always call. Some debts do not have an expiration date. Thomas was quiet for a moment. How are you feeling? Really? A pause. Getting old, Thomas. Things stop working the way they used to. I am sorry to hear that. Do not be. I have had more good years than I deserved. Another pause. Your family is well? They are. Both kids doing well. Sandra's healthy. We are good. I am glad. That matters to me. Charles, I want you to know something. What you have done for my family, the calls, everything else, it has meant more than I can say. You gave me 22 more years, Charles said quietly. Whatever I have done for your family is a fraction of what that is worth. The call ended. It was the last one. Charles's health deteriorated too severely in the years following for the tradition to continue. He died in August 2003. Thomas Gardner was 65 years old when he heard the news. He was retired from teaching by then, living with Sandra in the same Cleveland house they would bought in the 1970s. David was a public defender, Rebecca a head nurse at Cleveland Clinic. Thomas sat with the newspaper announcing Charles's death and thought about July 14, 1972. About a man sinking in a pool, about jumping in without thinking, about CPR in wet clothes. Until the medics came, he thought about 22 annual phone calls, about anonymous checks arriving at critical moments, about his children's educations being quietly funded by a movie star who he'd never asked for acknowledgement, and he cried. Not just for Charles, but for the weight of what they would shared, this strange, unlikely, 22-year relationship built on 4 minutes and 30 seconds of CPR in a Las Vegas pool. Thomas attended Charles's funeral in Los Angeles. He flew out with Sandra, telling his children only that he was paying respects to an old acquaintance. He sat in the back of the church, far from the celebrities and industry figures who filled the front rows. After the service, Katrina was greeting people near the exit. She saw Thomas and stopped. "You are Thomas Gardner," she said. Thomas was surprised. "Yes. How did you? My father talked about you. Every year on 34. Yes, Thomas was surprised. "Yes. How did you? My father talked about you. Every year on 34. He never told me to whom. But last year, when he was having a good day, I asked him who he called every July 14th. He said, a man named Thomas Gardner, who gave me 22 years of my life. He wanted me to know your name." Thomas felt his throat close up. He was a remarkable man. "He told me you saved him in a pool, that you did not even know who he was when you jumped in. Just a stranger drowning." Katrina took his hand. "He said that was what made it so meaningful. You did not save Charles Bronson, the movie star. You saved a man, a human being. And that distinction mattered to him." Thomas nodded, unable to speak. "Did you know," Katrina asked, "about the money he sent, the education support? I suspected. He never told you directly?" "He kept it anonymous. I think he needed it that way." Katrina smiled sadly. "That was Dad. He could not accept gratitude easily. Giving was easier for him than receiving." Thomas Gardner lived until 2019. He died at 81, surrounded by his family in Cleveland. At his funeral, David and Rebecca, the lawyer and the nurse, whose educations had been quietly funded by a movie star, both spoke about their father. Rebecca talked about finding out the truth after Thomas died. Going through his papers, they would found a journal he would kept from 1972. The last entry was dated July 14th, 2003. The first July 14th after Charles's death. It read, "No call today. No call ever again. First time in 22 years. I sat by the phone at 10 a.m. anyway, out of habit. I am going to miss his voice, not the celebrity voice, the regular voice, quiet voice of a man who felt genuinely grateful. I still think about that morning in the pool. How ordinary it was before it was not. A man drowning. You jump in, that is all. But somehow it became 22 years of phone calls and a friendship that neither of us ever quite named. I think he was lonely, in his own way, and so was I. These annual calls were the thread between two worlds that never should have intersected. I am grateful for everyone. T.J. Rebecca read this at the funeral and said, "My father did not think he would done anything special. He saw a man drowning and he jumped in. That is who he was, someone who acted without calculating the risk or reward. And somehow that simple act created this extraordinary 22-year connection. Charles Bronson gave us so much. My education, David's education, financial help when our family needed it. But Dad never saw it as a debt being repaid. He saw it as two men who recognized something in each other, a willingness to act when it mattered, a refusal to look away when someone needed help. They were more alike than they seemed. Both men who jumped in, July 14th, 1972. A schoolteacher from Cleveland jumped into a pool to save a drowning stranger. July 14th, 1973 through 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 July 14th. A movie star called that school teacher every year on the same date. This is Charles Bronson. I just wanted to say thank you. 22 calls. Brief, warm, genuine. A thread connecting two worlds that had no business being connected. And quietly, over those same 22 years, Charles Bronson funded the education and futures of a family he would never fully acknowledged, helping, not for recognition, not for gratitude. Just because some debts do not have an expiration date. A man had jumped into a pool without thinking, had breathed life back into a stranger for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Charles Bronson spent 22 years trying to repay that debt. Never felt he would succeeded. You gave me 22 more years. Whatever I have done for your family is a fraction of what that is worth. That is not Hollywood. That is not a script. That is just a man who understood that the greatest gift anyone can give is time, and that when someone gives you time, you never stop owing them. Charles Bronson got 22 more years. Thomas Gardner got 22 phone calls, and his children got futures they might not otherwise have had. And on 14th of July, for every year, for the rest of his life, a school teacher from Cleveland sat by his phone at 10 a.m. and thought about the morning he jumped into a pool without thinking. Because that is what you do when someone needs help. You jump in. That is the only lesson, the only story, the only thing that matters. You jump in.